Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, wonderful people, for being with us here today. We have an exciting session planned to talk through the module Take Back the Web, which features one of our guests, Douglas Rushkoff. We're really, really grateful to have him with us. But we'll start as we usually do with a bit about where we are in kernel and a bit about the syllabus. So just for a bit of an introduction, this underground stream kernel block 5 that is focused on the Web3 community is now halfway through its programming. In module 3, we kind of hit a transition point where we're moving from the people that we're spending time with to some projects that we're exploring towards a future for what we hope might happen next in Web3. And so just to give a sense to our guest for who's in the room, we have a wonderful group that we've been exploring with for the last 4 weeks, which is crazy to say. And we have 4 more weeks with them to still hopefully just get to know each other. And after that 8 weeks, the hope is that there's as much time as we might need to continue to get to know each other for the decades to come. So Block 5 is an incredible group from all over the world, all types of backgrounds and disciplines and multiplicitous identities. And many of them are with us right now in person. So thank you, everyone who's here. We're now in the build weeks. People who are focusing on adventures that are putting pen to paper in different forms may have already built prototypes, different user tests, and are preparing for Expo Week, which starts next Wednesday. If you haven't yet signed up, but you have an adventure that you'd like to share with people, both internal to the kernel world and some people that we invite for kind of like a semi-private science fair style Expo Week, the link is right here, and I'm sure that we can get it into the Zoom chat. We've already had, I think, at least 40 people sign up for Expo Week, and I think total we probably have 75 slots. After the 75 slot mark, we will have to try our best because we really want each of the people who expose to get an audience with at least 2 groups of 5 people. And that will be guides, mentors, great people from the space who you can share there to get to showcase. But here we are. I'll pass the mic to Andy here for where we are in the syllabus and that halfway point that I described that we're approaching.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I will run through it very briefly because I am looking greatly forward to, and have been for some weeks now, to peppering Douglas with all sorts of questions about what it really means to be human. And this is indeed like a large part of what the syllabus this week is looking at from many different dimensions. The 2 crafted readings from this week have to do with freedom and intention. Freedom takes a less political angle than you might expect from something like this, and begins by saying that the only freedom we truly have is the ability to be aware of the constraints within which we operate. It is this old idea of the freedom of no escape that comes out of the Buddhist tradition, and which points at a deep presence in the moment and awareness and acceptance of life as it is happening right now, not anywhere else around the world, not in somebody else's profile, not on some feed that is being relayed before you endlessly and infinitely by those who might not have your best interests at heart, but right here and right now. Freedom was extended before KB5 with an additional piece that looks at the Free Software Foundation and the GNU Manifesto from 1985 by Richard Stallman, which is a very typical Stallmanian document, but contains three very, very interesting aspects to it, where he talks about the golden rule being that if I like a program, I ought to be able to share it with others. I want to be able to use computers with honor, and I need to be hospitable to others around me. These three things, sharing, honor, hospitality, speak to the very core of what we can cultivate within when we are aware that true freedom comes from awareness and acceptance of our own constraints first, and then an ability to welcome others in with honor and with abundance to share that is not necessarily material, but comes from more of a total presence in the moment. This links very deeply to intention, because so much of how our modern culture conditions us is toward action. And actions do matter to some extent, right? But the primary matter is really intention. It is not about what you expect of the world. It is about what the world expects of you and how you answer that, right? This piece takes us back to all the way to module 0 and the play of pattern, that first question that we began with, what seems like a lifetime ago, but is really just 4 weeks. What is the question to which you are the universe's answer? The world, our environment, the people that we surround ourselves with, the relationships into which we enter are constantly asking questions of us. And as always, this primary focus is about how do you respond honestly, truly, with love? How do you make the meaning of your own life? You will see a little image of Viktor Frankl's beautiful book, Man's Search for Meaning, up there. And if you're into it, I highly suggest reading that book and then looking into logotherapy, which was the work that he did coming out of Auschwitz. All of it together comes to this really, really beautiful piece in that intention article, which comes directly out of Maria Popova and the work that she does at the Marginalia, talking about how it is to attend to the small joys of each day, weaving a bright necklace of little pleasures for your life. This conversation is one such little pleasure for me. And rather than discuss in too much detail the rest of the stuff which you can look into yourself, I will simply say that the four curated readings are all about these three pillars, right? Augmenting our ability to think for ourselves, reclaiming our time, and extending our ability to cooperate. This is shamelessly copied from the work of one Douglas Rushkoff, and we have him with us to discuss hopefully all of them, certainly time. His introduction is on the slides. He's really a man that in the kernel world needs very little introduction, but suffice it to say that he has written a great deal of moving and important work that focuses particularly on media theory, but ventures off occasionally into Judaism and open source religions, or tarot, or cyberdelia, or any number of other fascinating things. And he himself hosts his own podcast these days at teamhuman.fm. So if you want to play for the humans, not for the algorithms, that's a wonderful place to go. And Douglas, it's truly a privilege to have you with us here today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
This is the part where I get to ask you a whole bunch of questions.
All right.
Where I thought we could start is that in your latest book, Team Human, you sort of tell the story of capitalism by defining it as an operating system whose purpose it is to prevent widespread prosperity. You kind of go back and look at market money, which came out of the Moorish bazaars, and the European aristocracy's reaction to it, which was chartered monopolies and central currency. So I want to begin by asking, how can we
increase our bandwidth to the point where everyone can hear the other one speaking? He went away now.
We lost.
Cliffhanger.
Poor baby.
Cliffhanger.
It was a cliffhanger.
Please forgive me.
No, it's okay. It was the robots. The
It
robots.
was
were
the
coming
robots
for
that
it.
got me.
There he's back. He's back.
Right.
Then the
You got
robots
me.
will come. The AIs of the future, reaching
That's
back in
good.
time to prevent us from establishing rapport.
So Douglas, this notion, this definition of capitalism as an OS whose purpose it is to prevent widespread prosperity really kind of gripped me. And you speak about the chartered monopolies and the centralized currency, which was developed by the aristocracy to prevent widespread prosperity. And I wonder if we can begin by just thinking a little bit together about what it would mean to imagine cryptocurrency more as market money and how that might help us move it towards enabling transactions in real time. I would love to hear your opinion about these two things.
Well, I mean, nothing against anybody, but when we understand the full history and functioning of cryptocurrencies and blockchains, sometimes it becomes hard to imagine them as a retrieval of human scaled market monies, and easier to see them as a well rationalized extension of hypercapitalism. So there's the so far the only kind of positive use I can see for blockchains would be to enable kind of interoperability between simple market monies and favor banks of different communities. In other words, if I'm in a community of 10,000 people, if we need a blockchain to verify and authenticate what we're doing for each other, then we've got bigger problems than money, right? We've got essential social, cultural problems. But I could see that if if a collective in South Africa wants to exchange value with a collective here in New York, with other ones there and there and there, in complicated ways, and we want to rely on something other than nation states and central bankers to negotiate those exchanges, then it's possible, if we build a new kind of blockchain different than the ones we have so far, that don't either depend on proof of work or proof of stake to give credibility to the bankers, or outside gains to the bankers for doing it, then I could see us using it, But I guess the central issue that I feel like we have to address is one of the principles that was on that last main slide of yours, where you say we must develop the inner tools required to live up to our technology. That's a dangerous thought structure, right? It is incumbent upon we humans to develop the inner tools to live up to our technology. And a large part of my core says, fuck that. I'm here, I'm human. It's up to my technology to live up to being to the occasion of my existence. John Culkin, before McLuhan, he said, we shape our tools, and from then on, our tools shape us. Which is true, but I think that's more something to watch out for than something to turn into. It's like, okay, now our tools are shaping us. We better come to recognize how they want to shape us and conform to their to their demands on us. I don't know. If we live up to the blockchain as currently imagined, then we believe that we need technologies to substitute for the trust, because we've lost our ability to trust. So I don't know that they don't want us to develop that tool, because then we wouldn't be dependent on that piece of technology. So it's tricky, right? It's tricky. So, but in terms of blockchain, the main use I could see for it would be to do things kind of to globally interconnect cottage industries and localities that have as yet been unable to establish trust with each other and are really concerned about man-in-the-middle attacks, getting in between. I feel like what people don't remember about blockchain is that blockchain came from two-key cryptography, and two-key cryptography came because we were trying to prevent man-in-the-middle attacks when you would put in your credit card number that you're giving it to an authenticator who's actually not an authenticator. So here's your way to do it without anybody there. But man-in-the-middle attacks are not I would argue, are not the primary threat to our credibility. If you're afraid of the NSA, they're not going to do a man-in-the-middle attack to your crypto. They're going to take your laptop when you put it in for repair and stick something in it to watch everything you do. In other words, they're going to put a microphone in your house. It's like the man-in-the-middle attack is a very specific one, that it's good to have this new means of establishing secret trust between people, but it's not. I don't know that it's the basis for a currency. That said, if we can develop ledger systems and we don't need the blockchain to do it, but if blockchain makes it sexy enough for people to try it where they wouldn't try it otherwise, and sure, let's call it blockchain. But sure, let's look at ledger systems that don't use the Middle Ages version of debit and credit, of 3-column or 2-column accounting. Let's start looking at how do we break out of zero-sum business models. So we could start looking at other other ways of accounting that don't engender our sort of scarcity model. Right now, in order to make a market for something, you've got to make it scarce so that you can trade it. So what does a commons-based model look like, recorded on the blockchain? Then things start moving in another way. That's a long answer, but I sort of needed to, I'm just concerned that we not reverse engineer our society to suit the blockchain. Before, I'd rather, we can program a blockchain for us if we really are committed to a blockchain.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and thank you for setting the tone and foundation there. I appreciate it. I think one of the places that I want to pick up, there's a lot to say, and I will return to some of the stuff around more localized commons and the kind of cultural aspects that we might need to look at there, establishing rapport and many aspects of your work. But first, just this notion of a more creative way of doing accounting than 2 columns, and if the blockchain is a sexy enough thing to Trojan horse that into public consciousness, then it can be useful. I wonder, one of the things that you talked about in this presentation that we have linked in the syllabus where you're talking about present time is transactions that are earned into existence. I can have a music platform where instead of selling my soul to Spotify, which is built on the old torrents anyway and benefited enormously from lots of shenanigans that went on in the background, I can make music hopefully for the sacred act of it, just because making music is this beautiful thing to do, right? For its own sake, there's something really autopoetic and stunning about that. And I wonder how you think about what are the ways that we can legitimately account for that kind of thing in more creative fashions. Transactions earned into existence is one example of that, but perhaps you could speak a little bit more about what you're really thinking of in that. domain?
I mean, when I think too long and hard about it, I mean, I end up feeling like I start thinking about the way music is compensated in Bali, say, and in Bali, everyone makes music and basically nobody's paid for it. That there's um, in my utopian understanding of society, we would, and this is not to say artists shouldn't be paid right now and for what they do, which is important, but everybody makes art and everybody makes music, and that's part of what we do. That's just what, it's like, how do you get paid for making love? How do you get paid for a great conversation? And yeah, Joe is more fun to have in a conversation than Pete, just as Pete is a better violin player than Joe. But, these are the ways that we're just interacting culturally. When culture gets confused with capitalism, it gets really tricky, but yeah, you want people who can be full-time, in our society, because we're specialized. You want one person who's a full-time, putting tires on people's cars, and someone else is a full-time sitar player. So how do we come? So we're looking at this sort of intermediate stage where, some people get to have these sort of crazy creative careers, and other people, and the creativity is rendered onto the market as part of part of the employment model of people, and this other activities are considered are the same thing, but it's hard. I personally like, now the sort of the crowd patronage model of artists they like, because you can do that on a local level as a bar band, or you can do it in an Amanda Palmer way, as a traveling person who gets compensated in a lot of ways, whether it's a place that you a place that you stay, or someone supplies the food, other people can support with money. Are NFTs a path to crowd patronage? It's interesting. NFTs are a path to crowd patronage for people who really want to be able to prove that they supported the artist, right? So what they get, if they really want, I got a serial number here that proves that I gave them money, then sure. But I look at NFTs are a way for the underlying blockchains to make more money than anybody's making over it. You look at the, what was that famous sale? Beeple sale or whatever, that made more money for the guy for the currency that he had. I mean, he paid the money, the $36 million, and he made $100 million off his currency in the same day. So it's sure. If for people who want proof, it's sort of like, it is true that right now, if you're an artist, if you can get a bank to buy one of your paintings to put in their lobby, that helps, right? But you've got to be one of the few and the proud who, in the power law dynamics really take effect when you're looking for giant paydays of one of those giant NFT sales. But I don't know, for artists to be generating 10,000 computer generated icons based on a few things, and it just seems like there's a lot of noise. And I get an artist might have to do that in order to support their real career, but again, it's like the whole thing.
Yes, yeah, you'll find many people within this particular audience who have similar ideas, but one of the chords that this strikes with me is, there is a really enormously there are many dimensions to this problem, right? So like if we look at the beginning part about music in Bali, like the fact that everybody is really a musician and an artist of some kind, and it's natural as an expression of ourselves to make love, to make music,
Right.
to make art, all of these kind of things. And like in some way, this natural and autopoetic expression of who we are, like it doesn't ever and shouldn't be fitted into this model of capitalism that is all about like preventing widespread prosperity.
Right.
And your work is certainly like one example of that, which tends towards this focus on the human, the focus on establishing rapport, the local forms of organization, the political kinds of organization, walking in the streets. And I want to ask you about that, but I think to frame the conversation here, there's also a point, which is that it seems as if change at many different levels of the system is required, which is what I sense you pointing at when you say like we need these local commons and we need the ability to once again help our neighbors, but that needs to be somehow connected to a wider network of people with whom more complex transactions need to be possible in situations, and it's more difficult to establish trust precisely because in some way, the European aristocracy was the ultimate middleman. It's not quite as simple as that, but I think it's one interesting way in which to think of it.
Right. But the problem is the rent seeking, right? The rent seeking, and that's why the more that we can do, it kind of entirely locally and between people, and as almost non-transactionally as possible, but certainly in a local fashion, the harder it is for rent seekers to pop in. And the more we strive for scale, the easier it is for people to come in with algorithms and undermine what we do. I mean, the traditional way to do it is what we used to call Web 2. You create the platform on which everyone else does their thing. The new way, the Web 3 way, is to go meta on the transactions, which is why it's interesting. Zuckerberg even gives it away by calling it meta, right? So what's Zuckerberg going to do? He's going to try to monopolize the protocols we use to engage with one another. So there'll be trusted protocols rather than trusted platforms. So then it's almost like if you develop a language, which is augmented reality is a language, virtual reality is it's a language system that in which we'll operate. It's like owning the letter E. It's like, oh, so I'm going to own the vowels. So every time you want to use a vowel in there, you're going to have to pay for that use of it. It's useful. It can work, but I feel like such a large majority of our programming talent, our economic talent, our thinking talent is going towards thinking about the scaled part of the solution, which will be important for making the iPhones or, the cruise ships, but so little of our attention is going to how do we just restore the local agriculture that's near us? How do we move away from giant global brittle supply chains and towards more local manufacturing and goods production? So it's a question of emphasis. So we can talk about these big things, but without the little things, without the extremely local, it's hard. So you could talk about, like with a blockchain, and I'll use your kind of more Buddhist spiritual language to talk about it. You talk about the blockchain, and we could talk about issues of programming trust into a blockchain and all that. Fine. Do all the programming you want. Until a person can have both feet on the ground and feel grounded, they can't feel safe on an organic physical level. If a person can't feel safe, then no amount of programming on a blockchain is going to allow them to trust the person on the other side of the transaction or the verification or anything. So I would rather than spending 90% of our time and effort as thinking people on, well, what about the blockchain and how is it going to work? And do we proof of stake, proof of this, proof of that? Think about how do we get people on the ground trusting themselves and one another locally, and then at least they'll be, as you would say, open to rising to the occasion of these bullshit technologies that are trying to substitute for trust in the few situations that we do need to get involved in where trust is not possible. I froze
Amazing.
you.
Thank
No,
you.
I didn't. Okay. I'm
So
sorry.
let's talk a little bit about.
Right, there's
Yeah,
St. John Show
so
Sharp.
let's talk a
Like,
little bit.
why do we keep score? The reason we keep score is because we don't trust. The reason we keep score is because we think somebody's going to freeload. But frankly, they want to freeload. We have enough. They can freeload. They can freeload. There are some losers who are going to fucking freeload, you know, and they're losers. They can still eat. Here's a turkey sandwich. Go be a fucking loser. And the rest of us are enjoying ourselves working and playing and interacting and exchanging. You know, I'm gonna write whether they pay me or not. I'm gonna write, you know, as long as I get a sandwich, you know. So that's so, it's so funny that people are so worried about the freeloader, you know. Oh, he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything, you know. And that's what I want to finally get to. That's what the Team Human gets to at the end is, you know, is kind of the Sabbath. The reason we take the Sabbath, that 1/7 of our time not buying or selling or doing, is so that you can experience what is it like to not have to prove that I'm worth the air that I'm breathing. You know, I deserve to be here. I was born here and I deserve to be welcomed. I deserve my place. I am sacred and worthy just for existing. I don't have to prove myself to anybody. You know, and then once you start with that, again, feet on the ground, here I am, you know, here I am. Boy, it's such a better starting place. And then money is like, well, what's that about? You know, what are we actually doing here? All right, there's something scarce. We got to make a market. We got to keep track. Oh, how many did he get? Oh, look, he had 2 pieces of cake. I only had 1. Oh my God. Oh, you know, it's like, it's so much easier, but we created systems like long, complex supply chains that require accounting. Why do you think we did that? We in America, we made the suburbs for the car, right? Now people have to buy a car in America. And I'll say, well, why are you getting a car? Well, I got to get to work, got to feed my kids. You know why you need a car to get to work? Because GM lobbied the government to build these suburbs without streetcars and rail cars and all that, so that you would have to buy a car in order to get to work. That's the system that was put in place. So until we unwind that, we're going to continue rising to the occasion of our technology, rising to the occasion of the automobile, rising to the occasion of the highway, where the people and institutions that made these technologies did not have our best interests at heart. They're profiting off us by forcing us to conform to the very systems that they laid out.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point, and it's one that's particularly well made in Team Human, but with extra sauce and flavor now. I would love to hear a little bit more, because I think that you're at your best when you're talking in particular about reestablishing true rapport and connection with those around us. It links, you know, like what you've been talking about, like someone has to be full-time on the tires and then another full-time sitar player. It's all, you know, employment is fundamentally linked to the way that we experience our lifetime, you know, and it is accompanied, the move toward jobs and having to sell your time rather than the objects of your creativity is accompanied by a sort of move into teleology and end of history, the Christian narrative. There is this notion of apocalypse that links many of these technological ideas together. And you make the point that it moves us out of the what you call the eternal presence, right? Like this notion of cycles, best expressed sort of in reincarnation, but all over the place in other indigenous traditions. And in particular, the ability to make our own meaning. And this is something that I would love to hear in your local context. Like, what are the kinds of things about 2 feet on the ground, feeling secure, feeling like I am worthy just of existence? I've heard you talk in your podcast about like help your neighbor. If you have an old neighbor, like go and like sit with them for an hour. Like what are the kinds of things that you're thinking about in terms of like healing this local culture that we can more readily begin with than perhaps higher-minded abstract things of living up to our technology?
Well, I mean, they're different for everybody. But yeah, welcoming refugees, that's a good one. I mean, that one's at scale, right? Then maybe there's some kind of blockchain or something that would help with that, right? Because it's all big and foreign. But you know what I mean? It's like it's some giant thing. But it's like the easy stuff, and then it sounds all silly, to say it. But it's just shoveling the neighbor's walk when you're shoveling yours, and making eye contact with people. Doing Sabbath is a really good exercise if you do a really strict Sabbath where you don't go in a car or buy or sell or do anything, because then you have to find out who your neighbors are, because you can only walk around, and that's when you walk and you go, oh, I'm going to go to the park. And you're like, wait a minute, where's the park? Oh, they put a shopping mall here. Oh, that sucks. We need a park, and you start and you go, what do we do? Or go, work at your CSA if they'll let you, they'll let you go there, show your kid that, I mean, for some of you, I know you live in natural places, but show your kid that carrots come out of the ground, not out of a plastic bag of pre-cut, those little things. My daughter, when we grew food in the backyard when she's like 3 or 4, and I pull this thing up and she's like, how did that get in there? How did that get in there? Because she couldn't conceive that this thing comes from the ground, so it's like, it's that super simple stuff that we kind of take for granted. It's spend time with people, learn to make eye contact again, hug people. It's like, and then the next step after that is get involved in the really boring stuff of civics. Is sort of the next step up, which is what I'm trying to do now. And civics, oh my God, it's just, it's torture. You go to your town meetings and find out about zoning and planning and recycling and all the stuff that a town does, or your school board and these budgets and taxes. And I mean, it's horrible, but you can't complain about it unless you roll up your sleeves and get involved in actually doing it and change those systems. So I'm not like a Bannon person that thinks that we have to accelerate things to a crisis in order for the system to crash and then we build something else. I think we've got to move incrementally towards change. And that's also in the good ways. I get scared when I see environmentalists talk about, oh, we've got to do a full energy transition to renewable and recyclable and blah, blah, blah within the next 10 years, or everything's going to go for shit. And it's like, the amount of energy that will be required to build all those Teslas and solar panels and everything in the next 10 years would destroy the planet like that. I mean, we don't have that number of resources. The only, I mean, and I get in trouble for this, but it's true. The only possible path toward a sustainable future is for us to do less stuff, at least during the transition to renewable. We got to just do less. And it's so much easier to do less if you're stop doing all that other stuff, driving to the mall and whatever people are doing, and taking plane flights to places, and start walking around and seeing other people where you are. So it's really as simple as that. It's rather than going and doing something, get out and walk and meet people. I talk to in my town, it's funny. It's like most of the people who are out are old people, like the kind of old ladies with these weird little dogs with bad hips that limp around and stuff. And I was like, oh, fuck, is it the only people I'm going to be able to talk to? But yeah, so I start talking to them. They're so wise. They're so wise. And then you realize, oh my God, they're wise because they've been alive like 80 or 90 years. Of course, they have 20, 30 years more experience just living. And then I'm learning from these people. I mean, yeah, they can learn stuff, from me about whatever, how to use the ATM at the bank machine. But, what they've lived and what they've seen, and this Ukraine thing, to people who lived through World War II or this is like, yeah, duh, what did you think was going on? So it's we can talk about carbon offsets. Yeah, they're compensatory, aren't they?
I would like
Yeah, we can talk
I would
about,
like-
I don't like them. I mean, yeah, it's better than, if you're going to fly, it's probably better than not doing a carbon offset. But yeah, it's, it's carbon offsets is sort of like trying to replace old growth forest with a bunch of new poplars. It's less, it's this winding down, and the less you do, it's hard because we got to work more to make more because we're all gig workers, and all that. But it's just doing less. It's kids are finding that, you'll see it, whether it was the move to vinyl and to kids there's something else happening now. There's a slowing down. There's a different, I actually do have a certain amount of faith in a great cultural reset happening. Possible solutions. Walking around and talking to people is a solution. Meeting the old ladies is a solution. Just volunteering at your CSA is a solution. Doing less stuff is a solution. Driving your car less is a solution. Learning to play cards with people. Everything you do that is not buying, selling, producing, or consuming is a good thing, right? And it makes you an enemy of the market. Right? That's what the last thing and there is no they, but the last thing the market wants is for you to just be, right? And that's why there's all the communication that we get is that you have to do something, make something, produce something, consume something, play something, listen to something, watch something in order to justify your being, right? But if you just sit, you don't even have to sit. You could just sit without even sitting. You might as well sit because it's really good for you. But if you sit without even sitting, that's even more perversely fun in a certain level. I did, and this was in 2009. Some students of mine and I created a blockchain, and we called it proof of no work. So what you had to do in order to get a token was sit for an hour and not do anything. And then there was someone else who authenticated and verified that you didn't do work. And they got 1/10 of a coin for signing the piece of paper that said, I observed him for an hour not working. So it's actually two people not doing anything because they're both just sitting there and one's watching the other one not work and they get paid for it. And it was sort of our on Bitcoin, but it didn't catch on.
That's so funny. One comment in the chat, hugely regretting not taking your class at CUNY. There's so many more comments that I can get to, Douglas. Maybe I'll try. I'm going to try to go through some quick fire questions. We have 15-ish minutes left with you. Let's see. So some in the chat, I'll start with one from Sal. Or Sal, if you don't mind, do you want to just ask your question because you had a couple? While Salim is deciding, let's see, I'll try to find a couple of others. There's a question about disparity of opportunities across the world from Slava, people in developing countries who cannot afford to do nothing because of economic survival.
Right. No, I'm talking about all the people running around making NFTs or whatever they're doing. No, I mean, they first off, if we do less here in privileged countries, we're going to be taxing those people less. The current system where people in developing nations either work in close to slave labor conditions to get us our phones, or try to grow food in land that's no longer, arable because of post-colonial, the pollution of factories or Union Carbide or DuPont or whatever they did. We can relieve a lot of stress on those places, and we can create a lot more room for them to make pollution if we were making less of it ourselves. But of course they have to work. We all have to work. It's actually, this whole idea of the robot future in which everybody does less is not it's not really real, because the kinds of processes, at least so far, that robots enable are the same giant kind of big agra type processes that are really screwing things up. You know, we have, what is it, 30 harvests left on our little planet because of our what we're doing to the topsoil. So we actually need to be doing, and no one likes to hear this, but we need to be doing more labor intensive, what looks like more labor intensive forms of farming, you know, permaculture, agriculture, you know, retrieving Aboriginal techniques involve more human hands in soil and not, you know, digging it out with these giant machines and lifting up deoxygenating the soil. Because we don't know, in America, we think of, and in the rest of the world, they don't probably, but in America, we think of soil as dirt. We don't realize that it's alive and this thing that you can't just turn it over. It's a living matrix. So, you know, it's, if anything, it's us learning to work more, not them learning to work less, but then them learning to work back in the kinds of sustainable processes that they had before we went there. And, you know, we, meaning the I guess Europeans, went there, you know, and fucked everything up for them, you know, or the World Bank loans for them to develop just means so they can have chip factories, you know, and that's not necessarily going to make for a more sustainable world there. I mean, yeah, they're going to want to develop in ways that we did because we did, and it looks fun. So we've got to let them go through some of that, you know, rather than say, oh, now you're not allowed to make, you're going to want to make some chip factories, but at least to try to help them do it. Well, why don't you rather than having Intel come and franchise you a chip factory, why don't you do a worker-owned cooperative chip factory? And here's how that might look, you know, at least let them leapfrog us on the business models.
Yeah. That's perfect. There's a lot on that going in the chat. Maybe we can come back to Christina, who's a permaculture farmer herself, but Charlene had a really wonderful question that perhaps you could ask, or I can ask too. Either way.
Chestnut.
I don't mind asking Vivek. Hi, Doug,
Hey.
longtime fan. I would just love to know what you think about the feeling of countercultural hope that was so strong in the late 90s with like people like Robert Anton Wilson and all that kind of movement that was going on. And how, at least to me, I mean, I'm in my 40s now, so maybe it's like an age thing, but it feels like that hope has fizzled out a lot over the years. Like being part of Kernel is the first moment in years that I felt this like potential of hope again. And I'm just wondering if you have any ideas for how like we can go out and show the world that the potential of hope is still real, because on the internet especially, it just feels like we're surrounded with hopelessness and bitterness all the time. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I was part of this conference called DisinfoCon in 1999. And I gave this talk saying the counterculture won, that we won. And we've got to accept that we won, that we are no longer counterculture. We are culture. And the asshole George Bush conservative money people, they're counterculture because they're against culture, the living, wonderful exchange of stuff. And we didn't do that. We kind of maintained the counterculture, and I understand why. We kind of maintained a hostile, very dualistic posture, and got really serious, partly because I guess we were defending something at that point. And what happened, interestingly enough, was the far right took the counterculture's techniques. You know, Operation Mindfuck was the counterculture. Fake news was the counterculture. That was Paul Krasner, who, after Kennedy died, Paul Krasner published a edition of The Realist, where he reported, next to all these real facts, he reported that Lyndon Johnson penetrated John F. Kennedy's exit wound on the airplane, right? That Jackie Onassis walked in when this was happening and sexually penetrated this thing. And people thought it was real. Or Abby Hoffman and the Yippies, you know, circle around the Pentagon holding hands to levitate the Pentagon and say that they did it. You know, those are the kind of weird, fun, crazy, fake news, destabilizing things that the right ended up using, and using them for really nasty reasons. And part of the reality is that the counterculture grew up, and we came to see that there's some real huge global problems like the environment and all that. And in some ways, the natural humor and tweakiness of the counterculture, the Discordian destabilization, all those techniques started to feel inappropriate in some ways. You know what I mean? I know people even look at the yes men now and say, oh, how could you do that? You know, today when things are so serious, you know, it's like too soon. You can't joke about this, but it's tricky. That's kind of what hurt the counterculture. But I feel like now counterculture is a 20th century phenomenon. It's almost a 20th century weapon. You know, when there is almost like an Eisenhower, like 1950s overculture of top-down branding and communication. Now that we're in this much more fractal, self-similar house of mirrors, I feel like the counterculture can't define itself as counterculture. What we used to think of as counterculture now has to be almost like the sacred culture, the lovey culture, the soft culture, the human. That's why started to call it team human. To say who's willing to be on team human, another soft and squishy sacred person that where the action is in the squishy part between the yes and no, the 1 and the 0. You know, that there are ticks of a clock, and time is not the ticks. Time is the space between the ticks where we, the squishy people living in awe of creation, where we live. So the weapon of the counterculture is to encourage awe, is to encourage ambiguity, to encourage anomalous behavior, for people to live in those weird in-betweens. And you know, and to resist the urge, and I get it too, the urge to lock down and decide which affinity group, which thing, which Twitter group, which this, you know, to hold off on even having an opinion on things, you know, to hold off on the hot take. You know, I get asked so much, oh, right, what's your feeling on, so, you know, Mark Zuckerberg announced Meta today. What do you think? Write 800 words for tomorrow morning. What do you mean? Why am I obligated to have an opinion on this, you know, by tomorrow morning?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah. Wow. I don't want to necessarily ask for your opinion more, but the things that are here, like lots of interest in this idea of the sacred culture, the cozy culture, local communities. And there are these questions that are ultimately what a lot of this has been about already, right? How we reconcile the global economy with local community. John just reemphasized that question. But maybe more than any of that, I don't know. There's a quote, a poem in here. Maybe I could read that. I'm drawn to it from Marlon. Marlon, if you'd like to read it, maybe that's a good way to bring us home.
Okay. Well, this is from 1966. It's called All Watch Over by Machines of Love and Grace. I like to think, and the sooner the better, of a cybernetic meadow where mammals and computers live together in mutual programming harmony, like pure water touching clear sky. I like to think right now, please, of a cybernetic forest filled with pines and electronics, where deer stroll peacefully past computers as if they were flowers with spinning blossoms. I like to think, it has to be, of a cybernetic ecology where all free of our labors and joined back to nature, return to our mammal brothers and sisters, and all watch over my machines of loving grace. That's very telling.
Yeah. You know, the thing that Norbert Wiener got was that the fundamental difference between the industrial age and the digital age was going to be feedback loops. That's what cybernetics is, you know, and cybernetics most simply refers to the robot's ability to change what it's doing based on the feedback it's getting from its environment. So it's the elevator feeling where the floor is rather than pre-programming the elevator to go 10 or 15 feet, you know, but cybernetics is also the feedback loop between us and our machines, you know, and us and our environment. It's a way of understanding reality as a set of feedback loops rather than cause and effects. You know, it's what's causing and what's the effect. It's a marriage, you know, but what I still think is important, at least now, is understanding that these technologies are much closer to that environment. They are the meadow. You know, they're not the figure, they're the ground. They're not the object, they're the landscape. You know, and they're not, it's not like there are partners in this thing. They are, I mean, they're important, and there may eventually be ethical considerations to a running machine, you know, if we start to wonder what's conscious and not. But at least for the time being, I think it's okay to center life, you know, because life is what's under threat right now. I think it's okay to center life, and as human beings, because we are human, if not even to center ourselves, to at least accept that we have responsibility for stewarding this thing called life. You know, we are part of nature, but we're also a super conscious part of nature. You know, so we have the ability to shepherd and care for nature, to make nature less cruel, or at least as kind, you know, as kind as it can be. And
I think it's like we tend to confuse the map with the territory. That's probably the irony of this poem, you know, that this is literally the kernel of digital utopianism from 1966. And I think that, for example, we are not an ecology, that's just a model. So then, you know, that is an interesting thing. It's like how we always be aware that that's there, that we are part of the digital utopians, probably fifth generations or something.
Yeah, and the map, again, the map is another technology. Again, you create the map and then the map starts creating us. You know, and now that we have commercial maps, you know, the Google map, if your business is not on the Google map, it doesn't exist, right? So how do you get, you know, and that's my concern also of the blockchain. You know, if you don't have an address, where are you? You know, you don't exist. But that's not reality though. That's augmented reality. You know, that's the virtual reality. You're still here. We're still here in real reality. And we don't yet have the ability to represent all that is in one of our symbol systems, because we don't know all that is. There's all this stuff that we don't even have access to yet. You know, so that's why we can't just upload ourselves into Second Life just yet. You know, there's too much undiscovered country, you know, right between you and me when we're 1 foot away from each other to you know, to think that we can go do this somewhere else.
Go ahead, Andy, please.
If you have just a few minutes longer, otherwise we'll hand it over to Vivek to end. It depends if you have just 3 more minutes.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know when this person's coming. So
yeah. Wonderful. One of the things that I just wanted to pick up there was this stewardship of life and its attention to the eccentricity, right? The feedback loop is very circular. Eccentric humans are ambiguous and cozy and between 0 and 1 in these fascinating ways. And you wrote in Team Human, you know, eccentricity opens the gray area where mutations develop and innovations are born. Weirdness crashes boundaries, forcing us to see our complicity in reality creation. We break free of the imposed program and experiment with alternatives. This notion of co-creation, reality creation as superconscious aspects of the total field is really fascinating to me. And it seems to bear great reference to how you end Team Human, which is with this old Hebrew word, hineni. It's a very eccentric thing to say, right? If you think the whole world is sacred, why say, here I am? And I wonder if you have any thoughts on, like, you've given us so many ideas of talk to your neighbors, sign up for the CSA, get involved in electoral politics, go to the civic center and vote. What about being weird? And this weird statement of here I am, you know, this is where I stand and this is how I live. How has that been in your life? How have you come to that place?
Well, it has to do with there's a section in the book shame also. And, shame has been this weapon that's used against us. A lot of it's about conquering that. But, no, I'd always wondered, in Torah, whenever God calls one of the prophets, like he'll call to Abraham, he called to Noah, he called to, God will go like Abraham. And then Abraham goes, Hineni, which basically means here I am. And the rabbis always wonder, why is he saying here I am? It's like God sees him. It's like, well, you got to tell God, yeah, here I am. And the way I've always understood it is it's the prophet rising to the occasion, as you would put it, of godliness, of being here. I'm here. Here I am. I'm going to manifest. I'm here. Right. Because we are the I am, right? Here I am, I am. And I'm going to manifest, I'm ready and it's for us to do that. It seems to me that that's a way to stand up and say, I'm whoa, something's talking at me. To say I'm here is in some ways the most profoundly dangerous person a human can do, right? Just really stand and say, oh no, I fucking exist. I exist and I'm one of us, and my name is Douglas and I'm going to manifest. It's like, it's so weird, but it's also, it's something we're still I feel like maybe it's just me, but I feel like we're afraid to do that. We're afraid to stand up and just be, it's like what you see, it's part of what we love when we look at, the people in Ukraine standing in the street when the tank's going to come, and they realize that, no, I'm alive here now. And actually I'm more alive getting run over by a tank if necessary than running away and hiding, and it's not like you have to go stand in front of a tank in order to manifest as a human being, but it's analogously frightening on all levels to embrace your full capacity as a thinking, living, loving human being, living, I am not a consumer. I am not a citizen. I am not a writer. I am not a this. I'm not any of those things. I am not a Coke drinker versus a Pepsi drinker, or a Jew, or a this. I'm human. It's so squishy and undefined, but ready, and for me, it's saying I'm part of this thing. I am a member of this club. I called it a team, and team might have not have been the right word because it suggests there's some other team. And I guess if there's another team, it's just the anti-human, it's those that are afraid of so much capitalism. There's so many different things out there we have that are anti-human that people work for and strive to be a part of. I mean, the book I just wrote about this billionaires, it comes out like in the fall, they're trying to get away from us. They're really trying to escape from the humans, to get on Mars or whatever they want to go with their robots, and it's like, no, that's not it. So I figure the more of us that get up and say, oh, here I am, just looking for another person, another awakened one, and I don't mean like awakened, like, enlightened or woke, even in that sense. Just, are you awake? Oh, there's one. And you see them, you walk down the street. Well, in New York, because so many people are in their phones or in their minds or whatever. If you walk around just looking, you see one and you make eye contact with one. And it always reminds me of, I used to go to raves in San Francisco, and then every once in a while I'd be walking on the street, like during people's lunch break, and you'd see someone and you'd look at them and you didn't necessarily recognize them from the rave, but you could tell by the way you made eye contact that You were there, weren't you? Yeah, you were at that thing at 2 a.m. when the aliens came, right? Yeah, I could tell. And there's that moment of recognition, and that to have for your fellow beings, and you start finding them and you walk around available to that. They start clustering and you start getting this sense of solidarity and power. And then you start to feel like, oh, we can do this thing. We humans are here, and we are up to the occasion of our existence.
I just want to put this in the chat. There's people who want to go to a rave with you, Douglas. That's
oh yeah. All right, let's do one.
But that we can plan.
Anyone who buys the NFT can come to the rave.
Perfect. We'll get it built. I just wanted to point to this quote, and Douglas, if you do have to mindfully exit, we totally understand. We're going to stick around for another 10 or so, but from Douglas, it says, it's a very different presentist approach to problems where we move through media much more like a video game, in real time, first person, choice to choice. And I think it's just a very beautiful sentiment. It's something that, beyond the words DAOs or NFTs or any of the next crazes that come up in Web3, the question is, can these technologies help us move more like this? And if not, then fuck them, really.
But if you feel like it's helping you become more human, then it's probably a good thing. And if you feel like you've got to compromise one part or the other of yourself, then either reprogram it or get rid of it. Well, thanks for what you're doing, whatever it is. I don't fully understand it, but God bless.
God bless you too. God bless you too.
All right, you know where to find me.
See you.
So much.
Okay, have a good meeting, everybody.
Organizing a rave in the neighborhood soon. We promise.
All right,
hopefully the aliens will come back.
Doing it in South Africa. Yeah.
Bye, Douglas.
All right, send the boat around.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Okay, bye.
Well,
Namaste.